I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Kellogg Schwab, who will be presenting this morning's seminar. Dr. Schwab is a professor in the Department of Environmental Health Sciences and the director of the Global Water Program and the Center for Water and Health here at Johns Hopkins University. His research focuses on environmental microbiology and engineering with an emphasis on the fate and transport of pathogenic microorganisms in water, food, and environment. So without further delay, Dr. Schwab.
Great, thanks. It's a pleasure being here. Oh, yeah. We'll see if you clap at the end. No, this is great. I really enjoy this opportunity to communicate to you a lot of the different things that are going on at Hopkins. And as you heard, I'm actually part of the water program and initiative here at Hopkins, and I've got a few slides on that. So I'm just going to dive on in here. And what I'm going to do in the next 5.5 hours with you guys is talk about global water supply, because I've got the entire day right now. Just kidding. We will end on time. We start on time. And we're going to talk about global water supply, and then we're going to kind of just go right in on sources of water pollution, some of the agricultural impacts, human impacts, and drinking water treatment. And this lecture is a vignette, a snippet of what's going on at Hopkins and some of the research we're doing. And now I'm going to tell you the only thing you need to know. And then you can go to sleep for the next 50 minutes, because I know you're busy, and last night was fun, and all these other things, and I wasn't invited, but that's okay. And the only thing you need to know, that the single most important thing we can do in public health is wash your hands. So we got that out of the way. So that's one of the things we do here at Hopkins and other places, is practice what we preach and try to do that. So I communicate to you, wash your hands is important. But there's other things we can describe and go into. And so, welcome to Hopkins. The first thing you're going to do is have to take a quiz. Bummer. We're going to start off with a quiz. And this quiz here is that you all have to respond, and you have to raise your hand so I can see it. So who here thinks that tap water is safe to drink in the United States? Okay. For those that can't see the audience, we got about, I'd say about 70% of you guys raise your hands. That's great. Okay. How many brushed your teeth this morning? All right. Now, there's a few people brushing their teeth. All right. For those that said tap water is not safe to drink, what water did you use to brush your teeth? Did anybody here in this audience use bottled water to brush their teeth this morning or in the last day in Baltimore? Anybody? I've been asking this question for about 8 years. No one has risen their hand that they've used bottled water to brush their teeth in Baltimore, United States. Truly amazing. Isn't that fantastic? That is a thing that you can sit there and brush. Believe me, you're brushing your teeth, you are getting that intimate contact with the mucous membranes and all that thing. Even if you spit it out, that water is getting into places where you might not want it to be if it is of poor quality. So how much did you pay for that last bottle of water? Okay, we're going to pick on someone in here. Do you pay for that water there, or did they give it to you? They probably gave it to you free. There's a bottle of water in there? They gave it to you guys. Did they give you guys water? They give you bottled water? Okay, we got to work on that. So we're going to talk about bottled water and other things. So bottled water, you can pay, $1, $2. You go to an event. Now, me, it used to be Jimmy Buffett and James Taylor, but now it's Shakira, Ludacris. I was singing Ludacris this morning as I was coming in with my kids. And you pay up to $6 for a bottle of water, because underage kids can't drink the beer, so they buy the water in there. So it's truly amazing the amount we pay for bottled water. How much do you pay for that water from the water fountain? Anybody? Nothing? No. I usually hear, well, tuition. No, I'm a Tea Party kind of guy. I don't want to pay any taxes are just crazy in there. You hear about this tax. So what we take for value in perception in the United States is what we're going to talk about today as well. And then I would say, have you ever thrown a bottle of water away? How many of you have thrown a bottle of water away? Just an empty bottle, waste bottle? If you didn't raise your hand, you're lying. I'm sorry. We have all thrown a bottle of water, a waste bottle away, just tossed it away. Truly phenomenal what we take for granted and what we ignore about this footprint of how we're using water. And then I ask you, how many of you throwing a sink away? Well, maybe renovating and things like that, so that's part of the issue in there too. We kind of, our perception. So we're going to talk about these things and tie it all together. And oh, by the way, we're going to cover a lot of ground today. If you have questions, I'll try to answer them. I've got this lights on me here, so I can't see it, so you have to raise your hand. Hi, here at Hopkins, we like people to ask questions. I like to go on tangents and sidebars and all sorts of things, but we really only have till 2:30 this afternoon, so we'll get back on track. But what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the Global Water Program. I'm the director of the Global Water Program, and what this is essentially to address the challenge. And the challenge that we define is to provide quality and quantity of water needed to sustain the health of mankind and the environment. So although we're here at School of Public Health, we're going to bridge and show you the reasons why it's so important to go out besides just in public health. And our mission is to build a collaborative, multidisciplinary program, provide research and education, prepare professionals and students to be leaders, and discover solutions to domestic and international water challenges that are safe, scalable, and sustainable. And we're going to talk about some of those challenges that we're facing here in the School of Public Health and around the university. This is a university-wide approach. And our vision is to solve the global water challenge through innovation, education, and collaboration. You need a short vision statement. We try to get as succinct as possible. This covers a lot of ground. So in that, what we have is this initiative. Now, you'll hear, as you go through your time here, about the strong links between engineering and public health. Really have ties. Abel Woolman is an individual that in 1918 developed a system to chlorinate the water in large cities around the United States. Enough chlorine to kill the bacteria, not too much to kill the people. He was on Hopkins faculty for 50-plus years. His son, Reds Woolman, was on Hopkins faculty for 52 years and recruited me here. So we have a strong history of engineering public health, but what we've done is bring in behavior. Human behavior is so critical. That quiz I gave you, people don't think about things. And that idea is that perception. We need to understand human behavior. We need to understand policy. So we have School for Advanced International Studies in D.C. that we're working with. Down here in policy, human behavior, we have the Centers for Communication Programs. Natural and social sciences. The arts and sciences in the Homewood campus, that's the campus is about 4 miles away. They've got trees there. That's okay. But it's part of the Hopkins in there. Natural and social sciences, with earth and planetary sciences, satellite imagery, and science technology. Applied Physics Laboratory makes the coolest technology and widgets that you could imagine. They put things into space, and we use the technology they developed for miniaturization and took it into water and water research. It ties it together. So the goals we have are ambitious, but again, you hear this integrated, interdisciplinary approach to things. And we're covering 6 kind of key areas: water and health, water and the environment, food, infrastructure, water and energy, and water policy. And I'm going to give you snippets through this lecture to show you how we tie all this together in some of these key issues. And again, it's the training. It's the training of our professional leaders and students to really push forward in the water sector and what we value. And here is an example of what we're talking about of a challenge. Now, cholera in Zimbabwe. A couple of years ago, if you might remember, there was a massive cholera outbreak. And Chris Breyer is Associate Director of the Center for Global Health. So we have a Center for Global Health. We have a Center for Water and Health. We have lots of centers here at Hopkins to tie things together. But Chris Breyer went there, and his quote is, "Zimbabwe offers a classic lesson in public health. When a government neglects its basic functions, citizens die." The cholera epidemic in Zimbabwe was completely predictable and preventable. It's the outcome of a collapse of the most basic water and sanitation measures. It had a dictator, a leader that actually shut down the system and his own people, and it killed his own population there by destroying this water infrastructure. So some of those challenges that we face is how do we deal with illnesses that are still rampant around the world? In the United States, you probably not have to worry about cholera and typhoid. So we've gotten away from that, but many areas of the world, this is a major challenge. So here is just to set the stage with respect to projected water scarcity in 2025. And I draw your attention to, you can see that in Africa and Asia, that there's areas that have physical and economic water scarcity. But in this particular diagram, one of the things you have to do here at Hopkins is kind of question things. Really kind of say, wait, does this make sense? And you can see blue means little or no water scarcity. And I would attest to you that that's not quite true. Because if we look in the United States itself, there's extreme water conflict and challenges that are going on. If I say, anybody from Atlanta? Anybody from Atlanta? So Atlanta, a couple years ago, a wet kind of area of the United States, you guys almost ran out of water. Essentially, Florida was upset with Georgia because Georgia was taking too much water. So in the United States, if you see threats to human water security, that the United States has hot zones as well. In California is clearly one, Florida and the central part of the United States, and all the way across the world. This is a major issue. So it's not an us versus them. It is a we challenge that we're facing on this. And we know there's going to be challenges with the perturbations. Global climate change will have unpredictable but potentially devastating consequences in the hydrological cycle. Now, I didn't say global warming. I said climate change. And these changes are to the amount of precipitation. There's annual and seasonal distribution and onset of snowmelt that will change. That's going to cause problems. And there'll be increasing frequency and severity of floods and droughts. Bangladesh just had a major flood. There's areas that are droughts If you remember in Russia, there was a drought that devastated wide areas of that, and then they had massive forest fires. This is things around the entire world. And there's going to be a lack or a loss of reliability on existing water supplies and reservoirs. This is going to generate conflict and challenge. But what we must remember, that it's not just the human population, but that it's a wide approach to things, and actually water rights are vigorously defended by privileged users. And agriculture and manufacturing use the greatest share of the world's water. And agriculture actually uses over 80% of the water use. You can see a canal in the desert that's unlined with evaporation is a massive amount of waste that goes on with this water uses. And scarcity has an economic issue in here. The scarcity of water is an economic issue. Water has an economic value in all its competing uses and should be recognized as an economic good. Now, I personally believe that everyone has the right to water. It's an inalienable right. However, it costs money to generate high-quality water. It costs money and effort to produce the quality of water and sanitation that people are going to need. So there's a debate that's going on now regarding if users should pay for these costs to assure accountability and financial stability. There's one of these issues that we can't just give things out for free. I ask you, how many of you have ever washed a rental car? Probably not. If you own something and value it, perhaps we take better care of it. That's a kind of an interesting thought process, but one we need to keep in mind, to consider. That's a very challenging approach. So what do we take for granted in the United States? I love indoor plumbing. It does not get any better than that. You know, in the United States, you can go to any city in the United States, walk to the courthouse, preferably on the correct side, take a long, cool drink from a water fountain, and be reasonably assured that you're not going to die in 2 days. And that water comes out all the time. You can wake up in the middle of the night, take a few steps, urinate or defecate, flush the commode, whoosh, out of sight, out of mind. And we expect that to work all the time. We expect that our water will come out of a pipe whenever we turn it on, and that it's not going to kill us. Phenomenal. Truly staggering that we have that capacity. Some of that development was here at Hopkins. Throughout the decades in the past century, it was Abel Woolman to generate that protection that we just take for granted now. So how much do you think it costs? Any homeowners in the audience? How many of you guys own a home? Great. Do you know how much you pay for your water bill? No idea. Don't have to pay it. Don't have to worry about it. All right. Well, then people don't have a clue usually about the water bill. But how about cable? How much do you guys pay for your cable? Everybody probably has cable. And I would attest you, if you don't, great. And if you're here, you're going to study like crazy. You don't need cable. It's overrated. But cable, you're talking $100 a month, $150 a month for cable if you have internet access. So for water, how much do you think it costs for water coming out? And we'll take it, and I'll tease that out in a minute in a slide. How many are from California? Any from California? Great. Is it wet or dry there in California? Relatively, most of the time. It's a dry state. Should you pay more in the west in California where it's dry than here in the East Coast where we get a lot of rain like today, do you think? What do you think? Should you pay more or less in a drier area than a wet area? Yeah, this is kind of picking on people in the middle audience. Yeah, maybe more. Amazingly, in the United States, we pay more in the east than we do in the west on average. And this is the monthly water and wastewater charges for 7,500 gallons, 28 cubic meters. It's about $50 to $60 a month. In the West, it's $40 to $50 a month, $1 to $1.50 a day. And what this volume gets you is 150 to 200 gallons per dollar. Half a penny per gallon, 0.03 cents for a 16-ounce glass of water. Oh, by the way, that's waste removal as well. It's actually 0.015 cents for that glass of water. And we'll bring back these costs in a minute and its prices of what's going on. So in the United States, we have very cheap water and a lot of it, as much as you possibly can want. Many areas of the world, that's not the case. This is outside of Lima, Peru. We've studied in many regions. I've been in Lima, Peru. This is a household of 7. This is their water supply for about half a week. It's got open reservoirs here. There's a dog here that's in connection. This is where they urinate and defecate. It's got a great view. There is no waste removal. The waste builds up in the compound, and it flows directly back into this household. There are 1 million people living outside of Lima, Peru like this, without water and sanitation. There are over 850 million people that lack access to improved water sources. Now, improved means that there's a pipe near your house in many instances. It doesn't mean it's safe. It means you have close access to it. There are 2.4 billion people that don't have access to improved sanitation. And coverage for both improved water supply and sanitation lags behind in the poorest communities. In the rural areas and the urban and peri-urban slums are really challenged about this. And every year, it's estimated 1.5 million children under 5 die from diarrheal diseases. That is, every 15 seconds, a child is dying from a diarrheal disease, greater than AIDS, malaria, and measles combined. So one of the challenges that we face with this, that half the hospital patients have water-related diseases. And I know that improved water quality, access to water, and sanitation can dramatically decrease that burden. We have the technology now in our hands to dramatically decrease that burden. Why can't we succeed? These are the challenges we're facing in public health and ones that you'll have to address, of linking these things together in an interdisciplinary approach to address these fundamental questions. And these are some of the things we're addressing here at Hopkins. So, how much water do you think you need? And they've come up with some numbers for basic water requirements. And this is the minimum standard to achieve drinking, sanitation, bathing, and cooking. And it's anywhere from 50 to 100 liters per person per day. So I'm going to tell you a startling fact. Water is heavy. And in Africa, women and girls spend about 40 billion person hours a year hauling water. This woman has 30 liters on her head. How much does 30 liters weigh in metric? Anybody? 30 kilos. 1 liter is 1 kilo. All right, we great to go into metric, but how many pounds is that? Anybody know how much that is in pounds? About 66 pounds, 2.2 pounds per liter. That's a staggering volume and weight. I have 20 liters of water right here. 20 liters weighs how much? 20 kilos, 44 pounds. Anybody want to start walking? How's your back? Your back okay? HIPAA requires me. HIPAA is regulations in there. Do you have a strong back? Arm? You want to try it? I'll try. Okay. We're going to watch this individual start walking, because that woman right there is going to walk for 3 kilometers. So don't put it on your head. Just kind of carry your hand. Don't drop on your toes. Go there. Yeah? How's it feel? Good? Start walking. You can watch her or me. It's okay in there. Everyone gets to carry water at some time or fashion. Don't drop it on your toe. Keep walking. You've only got about, probably about 2 hours to go to get back to your house. That's great, by the way. That's excellent. Thank you for her to do that. We appreciate that there. Okay, I won't put you to work. I'm 27 and made out of titanium. This is no problem at all. No. This young girl, oops, going the wrong way. This young girl here has a permanently deformed neck from carrying water. She is permanently deformed, and she will not go to school. She's carrying the same weight as her almost, 44 pounds, every day. And the reason she won't go to school, she gets up 5 in the morning to haul that water every day. The reason she won't go to school is there's no place for her to urinate or defecate at the school. And in many societies, males, it's okay for them to urinate or defecate wherever they are, on the side of the road, in the bushes. But for women, that's not the case. If they go and use the bathroom in the open, they can be accosted. There's a challenge for them. There's no place for her to have her menstrues. This is the challenge we face. How do we empower that young girl to allow her to go to school by providing sanitation? That is the challenge. And there are hundreds of millions of these people that are chasing this. And that's what we're dealing with at Hopkins to address that. So when you're waking up in the middle of the night, flushing the toilet, and it's out of sight, out of mind, think about this young girl who's not going to school because she has no place to defecate during the day. She has to wait until night or go with her aunt or someone else in her family to protect her while she's doing basic bodily functions. You can see me up here, by the way. I'm like here in gloves and all this. And this water that they're using, this is in Ghana. This is their drinking water. That source of water is loaded with bacteria, viruses, and protozoa, and they're getting sick. We know it. And so we're working on technologies to evaluate that in the field and actually in Ghana as part of the process there. So what about the United States? How much water do we use in the United States? 40 billion gallons a day of treated water. And that's gallons, 40 billion. Another 300 billion gallons a day of untreated water for agriculture and industry. On per capita, we're at about 100 to 150 gallons, over 500 liters per person per day. 30% of this for outdoor uses. Washing your car, watering your lawn. High quality, we call it potable water, drinking water. Anybody wash their car in August and drink out of the hose? Have you ever done that? You're still here. That's a great thing. We have high quality water, but why are we using it to wash our cars? There's this disconnect in there. Flushing toilets is about 25 gallons per person per day. So that's a truly phenomenal amount of water that we use in the United States and we take for granted. A minuscule fraction, less than 1%, is actually directly consumed for potable use, for ingestion by humans. We have this massive amount of water that we produce and minimal amount used directly for human consumption in there. So what it is, what do we have here in the United States is public water systems. And a public water system is service connections, serve 25 people a day for 60 days a year, and there's 160,000 public water systems around the United States. 50,000 that are community, so in cities and such, and 110,000 non-community water systems, schools, rest areas. That's why you can drive down the interstate, stop at the rest area, take a drink of water from the water fountain, be sort of reasonably assured you're not going to die because these are regulated. The agency that regulates these, except for after today, because there's a government shutdown potentially, is the Environment Protection Agency, the EPA. So in the United States, we have laws and regulations in place to allow for high-quality water. Many areas of the world, there is no legal capacity for them to determine the quality of water in it. And this is one of the challenges we face as well. So we'll step back and talk about water pollution for a minute and go in there. This is a quote by Gandhi that sanitation is more important than independence. And to point out that it's not necessarily an issue that is a them. It is an us as well, we. Cuyahoga River. Anybody from Ohio? No? Yeah, Ohio. Great place. Love it now. Back then, when you have a flammable sign on your river, this is usually not a good thing. When you have a river fireboat that catches on fire itself, this is usually not a good thing. This picture here was a fire that occurred in 1952. But the Cuyahoga River fire in June 22nd of 1969 drove the United States to realize we have problems in the U.S. and we've got to start cleaning up our water. This developed the Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Water Act in the 70s, not that long ago. So we have to remember the United States, things were pretty bad. We still have ways to go, but we have now these regulations in place. And these pollutants come from a wide variety of sources, from industry, organic and inorganic chemicals, and we can have thermal pollution, particulate, municipalities from sewage and sludge, and agriculture, all potentially contaminating our environments that we have to address. And actually, agriculture is the biggest polluter in the United States. A lot of this is eroded sediment coming off here. I hope that you're able to get to the Chesapeake Bay. It's a wonderful resource, but a lot of these things come into the Chesapeake Bay and cause problems with the pollution in the bay. There's also fertilizers, and it's called eutrophication. Too much fertilizers causes things that run off from the field into the rivers. Algae will grow in these rivers, and this is a river actually. This is not a putting green. The algae will then die. They sink to the bottom. Bacteria eat that algae and depletes the water of oxygen. We get dead zones. So eutrophication, pesticides, animal waste, and concentrated animal feeding operations. And it's estimated farming is responsible for about 70% of the current water pollution in the United States. So why would someone in public health be talking about these issues? Well, this is a concentrated animal feeding operation. This is a single chicken, and in this one house, there are about 35,000 chickens. This is a master's student that worked with me, and we were studying the water. This is the water coming out of these chickens areas here. So we've done studies in concentrated animal feeding operations on the quality of water. We've also looked at swine concentrated animal feeding operations. This is a swine barn. There are 5,000 swine in that barn. There's about 25,000 swine in this one set of barns here, and another 25,000 in the set back farther over here, 50,000 swine. Inside of that barn, these are individual pigs here. My colleague was taking this picture of me, and he was kind of humoring because this pig right here is about to chomp me. So we're in there and we're studying. And what are we doing in public health studying this research? Well, all the waste from those animals ends up into cesspits. They're called lagoons. And then this is applied to the land. there's minimal treatment of that waste. So studying this in a public health perception is what's going on in the communities in the surrounding areas. So we went and evaluated these cesspits for levels of microorganisms. And here we are doing that, and I don't know why the student's taking a picture of me collecting the waste instead of me taking a picture of the student, but that's a whole other conversation in there. But we collected waste from these cesspits, and we evaluated them for levels of bacteria. In this case, we looked at fecal coliforms, E. coli, and enterococci. And what we found is that there was a lot of bacteria, as you might expect, per liter. In this case, you can get about 5 million to 10 million of these bacteria per liter. And these cesspits can hold hundreds of millions of liters in some instances. So we're talking 130 trillion bacteria in these lagoons, these cesspits. Now, what's the problem with that? That in itself is a challenge. But what we did is we investigated the antibiotic resistance of those microorganisms, because animals are fed subtherapeutic levels of antibiotics for growth promotion, not for the health of the animal. And when you give an animal a subtherapeutic level of an antibiotic, it can generate resistance of the bacteria in there. And we found that these bacteria, in this case the enterococci, 69% were resistant to erythromycin, 85% to tetracycline, but none were resistant to vancomycin. These antibiotics are used for humans as well, by the way. And the reason why there's high levels of these and not that is that these two antibiotics have been approved for use in animal subtherapeutic, but the vancomycin is not. Clearly showing the link that if you give animals antibiotics in a subtherapeutic use, they can generate these resistant bacteria that can be problems for human health. We provide the evidence-based approach to show these data to help drive change here in the United States with how we're handling our animal and feeding practices. And so this is part of what we're working on. We're also working on microbial pollution as well for direct drinking water. This is the impact of gastroenteritis at any one time in the world. About 200 million people on Earth have gastroenteritis, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. This is not a lunchtime conversation, so we're okay on that. And the volume of diarrheal fluid discharged in the environment each day, because the volume of water flowing over Victoria Falls every 2 minutes, 200,000 cubic meters of fluid are impacting our environment each and every day. So besides remembering to wash your hands, the other thing we should perhaps consider is how can we take this and deal with that? Because this is a major challenge. That animal waste and human waste going in affects human health. Morbidity and mortality. Morbidity is illness, mortality is death. And the case load is very high for diarrhea. Almost everyone is going to get diarrhea at some time, usually per year, so it's a high case load, 5 to 6 billion, and a high death load. It doesn't mean other things aren't a problem. Respiratory infections actually have higher mortality than they do for diarrhea, so it's not to ignore that. And then there's individual illnesses and diseases that you'll hear about here at Hopkins: malaria, measles, schistosomiasis, whooping cough. Vaccines have been developed for this. We're working on other ones. But diarrhea is a major problem and area in there. So these things might be in the environment that cause diarrhea. And as an environmental microbiologist, what microorganisms might be in the environment of a challenge? And so there's 3 groups of microorganisms: the bacteria, the parasites, and the viruses. And when we talk about these microorganisms and we talk about why I can take a drink of water — this is tap water, by the way, I love it — how we can go about drinking that water here in the United States and not be worried about it, we have to remember, with respect to microbial contamination, 2 things: the size of the microorganism and how resistant it is to inactivation. And the most commonly used disinfectant is chlorine for drinking water. So these 2 things. And this is a cartoon of the size. This is a red blood cell, about 7 microns. This is a picture of Cryptosporidium, a protozoa, about 3 microns. E. coli bacteria, 0.5 to 2 microns. And way down here, my most favorite microorganism, the norovirus, 0.03 microns in size, very small. So if you're treating water, you'd want to make sure that you are able to treat the water for these very small microorganisms and not just the larger ones as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing to remember is that these things, these microorganisms, vary in how long they can stay in the environment. The parasites last a long time. The viruses last an intermittent time. By long, I mean months to years and still infectious. The viruses are intermittent. And both of these groups are much more resistant to chlorination than the vegetative bacteria, the E. coli. Doesn't mean the bacteria are not a problem, but there's a difference in this. So how do we get this water? Here in Baltimore, in our treatment systems. We're here in Baltimore, so we study things not only around the world, but we study things right here in our own cities. In Baltimore, filters and distributes 265 million gallons of water per day. It collects and treats 240 million gallons. Just think of that number of millions of gallons per day coming in through Baltimore. It has 3,400 miles of water mains and another 3,000 miles of sanitary mains, or the waste mains. 1,000 miles of storm drains, 16,000 manholes, 33,000 stormwater inlets. This is a major enterprise. So how? Any math majors in here? No one's going to admit to that. They might get picked on, I know. You can see we treat 265, but we only process for drinking water, but we only process wastewater of 240. About 24% of the produced water in Baltimore is lost through aging pipes. We have very old pipes. So we're losing about 64 million gallons a day through our aging pipes and infrastructure. There are some other things that are occurring, but this is the major problem there. And only 1% of this is directly human consumption. So we have this process that we treat water in the United States. How can we take this water that can become of low source quality, poor quality, and make it so that I can take a drink and brush my teeth in ignorant bliss? So we have this system in place for treating water in the United States: coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, filtration, disinfection, and finally distribution in there. So for an example, here in Baltimore, we take water, raw water that comes from protected watersheds. So Abel Woolman, who developed the chlorination, also said in Baltimore in about 1920s, protect the water, protect your source water. So we have great reservoirs that have protected watersheds. Except when all the students and people come into Baltimore, we use up that water, we have to have other sources. The other source water we use is the Susquehanna River. Now, the Susquehanna River starts in New York, goes through Pennsylvania, ends up in Maryland. It has a lot of contaminants in that water. So sometimes Baltimore source water is of poor quality. And we take this source water and we add chemicals to it. And so the raw water comes into a treatment plant. We're talking hundreds of millions of gallons. We add chemicals to it called alum. And this alum forms a gelatinous mass. And this gelatinous mass gets bigger and bigger in these flocculation basins, and then it slowly settles out. As the alum settles out, it actually traps the particles in there. And this is part of the treatment process in there. So I've got some Baltimore City water. I'm just kidding. I have water that I added some dirt to. And what I'm going to show you is that when we add a chemical coagulant, in this case we're going to add an alum, it's going to form a gelatinous mass. So this is part of the studies that we're working on. And you need to know the pH, the temperature, exact conditions of this, and it has to be the exact right dose. So I'm going to add a little bit. Is that good? More? Yeah, more. Yeah, why not more? It's always good. No, actually, you really want to know exactly how much to put in there. So this is just a diagram of that. So what we do is we flash mix it. We rapidly mix this. And this alum is going to form in there. I'm a science nerd. Control. So we got one in there. And then this gelatinous mass will form. You can watch that or me, and it'll slowly settle out. Now, I'm also a believer in backup. So Julia Childs would always have something. This is what it looks like after you're done. So here's what we have if things work well. So anyway, the idea of this is experiments really work all the time. So what we have here is this gelatinous mass that forms a flock that slowly settles out that then has clear water. Traps the particles, removes the microorganisms. But we don't stop there. We then filter the water through large filters. We then treat the water with chlorine, and finally go to those thousands of miles of distribution systems. Multi-barrier. If you come to my lectures, you've already heard everything, so you don't even have to come to my class now because I've given it all away there. But water's heavy and all this. Multi-barrier. That's why I can take a drink of water and be reasonably assured that I'm not going to die in 2 days because of this multi-barrier treatment system. That's delicious, by the way. Now, I said reasonably, and I said death. We are one outbreak away of having a challenge of promoting tap water. But think about it. Maybe 1 or 2 weeks out of 60 to 70 years or 80 years of life, you have to treat your water additionally. But all the other times it's coming through this tap water that's available. It's truly staggering, and it's an amazing feature in there. What we use in most systems now is chlorine. Chlorine is promoted around the world. It is in most drinking water systems here in the U.S. and around the world. It effectively inactivates most microorganisms. Anybody from Milwaukee? So Milwaukee had the largest outbreak in the United States in '93, and what they had was a cryptosporidium. It's a protozoa that does not react with chlorine. So they had an outbreak that occurred in the city, and the issue was half the city got sick. Why half the city? There's 2 treatment plants. One treatment plant didn't work well, the other one did work well. So that's the challenge. So there's challenges in there. But the idea is chlorine has been very effective, and it can activate many types of microorganisms. And it provides a strong residual. It protects that water once it gets into the thousands of miles of distribution systems. And we know chlorine is very effective. But the problem is when chlorine reacts with these organics, cloudy water has organics in there, it can create disinfection byproducts called trihalomethanes. So the challenge is to deal with how we're going to decrease the microorganisms, but also be careful about disinfection byproducts. When I go around the world, I tell people chlorine is a good thing to use. And they go, wait a minute, because around the world now, what do people have? They have cell phones and internet access. So people are Googling around the world in the middle of Africa saying, wait, you're giving me a substance that could potentially be carcinogenic. You're trying to kill me in 30 years from cancer. And I'm saying, wait a minute, if you don't do the chlorination, in 2 days you could be dead from the cholera. These are the challenges we face, and we have to be smart about how we're developing our technology and our communication and the goals there. And so that's part of the issue there, is using the new technology, but also addressing conventional ways and additional treatment mechanisms in there. So I always get asked about bottled water. So we're going to end this kind of vignettes on bottled water. And bottled water is actually regulated by a different agency, by the Food and Drug Administration as a food. The EPA regulates your drinking water. The bottled water actually has less regulations than the drinking water. It is monitored less frequently than the drinking water. And there's several different types of bottled water you can get. Artesian, fluorinated, ground, mineral, you name it, you could probably get it. Most of that bottled water comes from municipal water sources. And this number is actually increasing dramatically, that most of the bottled water from the large bottled water companies is actually municipal water that goes through additional treatment. So Dasani from Aquafina, Dasani from Coke, and Aquafina from Pepsi is tap water that they further treated. They do additional treatments, reverse osmosis, ozone, UV, carbon filtration. And the other thing to think about is the images can be misleading. If you look at Aquafina, it's got mountains and streams, looks like it's coming out of there, and it's this nice looking label on that. No, it's tap water that they further treated. There's some lawsuits that are going on about this thing. So I promote tap water directly without bottles. But there's this issue about bottled water in the United States. People say, oh, it's the way to go. It's the way of the future. And it's truly staggering numbers. These are some data from the bottled water marketing industry. And what you can see in 2008, we had 9.4 billion gallons of bottled water produced. And it's about 12 billion gallons produced. And it's almost $15 billion in sales for bottled water. These data are available from the USDA, and in 2006, on average, bottled water, there was 8.2 billion gallons, so this is 27 gallons per capita. You know what's more than bottled water in the United States? What we drink more than bottled water that comes out of a bottle? Soda. And soda, carbonated drinks, we're at 50 gallons per capita. This is almost a gallon a week per capita. You talk about an obesity issue that we can describe in there. Liquid sugar. These things are basically no caloric value besides just getting that increased level of sugar. And oh, by the way, we can talk about beer as well. So on alcohol beverages, we're at about 25 gallons per capita, half a gallon per person per week. If you do the math on that, that's a staggering thing that we deal here at Hopkins as well with alcohol use and abuse and these challenges that we face with traffic and these things in there. But for bottled water issues, it becomes a challenge to address this because there is a lot of marketing that goes into bottled water. But we step back and look at the footprint of bottled water. Here it becomes a little bit disconcerting. So the plastics manufacturing industry says it takes about 3.4 megajoules of energy to make 1 liter plastic bottle, cap, and packaging. And there's 31.2 billion liters of water that were produced, had 106 billion megajoules of energy to produce that. And a barrel of oil contains about 6,000 megajoules. So the Pacific Institute, this is a group and organization that works on these things, estimates that about 17 million barrels of oil need to produce the plastic bottles that are produced for bottled water. And the energy required to deliver that water is staggering. Water is heavy. She carried around 20 liters of water. And this is a study that was done for delivering 1 liter of water in Los Angeles. If you take bottled water that was produced about 200 kilometers away from LA, it's about 5.8 megajoules per liter. If you import that water from France, for example, you're talking 10.2 megajoules per liter to get that water to someone in LA. The tap water coming out of there is 0.005 megajoules per liter. The amount of energy produced and used to produce bottled water is staggering. The footprint is quite large. It takes about a gallon of water to produce 0.2 gallons of bottled water. And we throw away an incredible amount of bottles of water. 22 billion water bottles are tossed away each year, 60 million each day. Very few of them recycled. And that becomes the problem and the challenge in there. Now, I was in Chicago last week, and then I took a picture of this at the hotel, and we can see this is Fiji water. This water is $4 for 500 milliliters, for half a liter, so for a pint. You're talking $8 a quart. You're talking $32 a gallon for this. And they have carbon negative, globally positive labeling and marketing strategy for Fiji water for the past 3 or 4 years. So the bottled water industry has been smart about trying to say we're carbon neutral by offsetting our costs for doing this. Fiji water. You're flying water, you're shipping water from an island to Chicago, and you're saying you're environmentally stable. This is the challenge we face. And the water utility and industry hasn't quite figured out how to challenge and address this water marketing kind of scenario in there. So the idea behind this kind of scenario and what we're talking about here is a snippet and a snippet of what we're doing at Hopkins to address these issues. So I'd leave this with you, that water is a finite and precious resource. That we take it for granted in the United States has driven our economy, but we really need to be aware of that. And fresh water is not distributed uniformly across the earth. Therein lies the challenges that we're addressing. And it's not only just drinking water, but there's agricultural issues, and we didn't get into energy and all the other ones that are going forward in there. Many countries are facing water stress or water scarcity that can create political conflict, and we have to deal with that as well. So what can you do? Well, the single most important thing you can do is wash your hands. You tell them in the beginning, you tell them in the middle, you tell them at the end. So we've got that out there as part of our marketing strategy. You can also conserve water. You can protect that finite resource here in the United States. Watershed protection. It makes intuitively obvious if it's clean water coming in, it's better to take care of it, clean water going out. And here in the United States, it's not just an us-them thing. And in the United States, what we take for granted will disappear in a couple decades. The water infrastructure has been rated as a D- in the U.S. The pipes are almost 100 years old in many major cities. If we don't take care of those pipes, we are not going to have the capacity of water coming into our homes or the flushing and waste removal in there. So when you become mayor and then come up and run for president, I will vote for you if you say you're going to take care of my wastewater infrastructure. We need to let people know and communicate. Part of the evidence we develop here at Hopkins is disseminated out to change policy and drive change. And so these are the challenges we face and some of the things that we're working on here at Hopkins. And I'm going to end it with that. And I have time for perhaps a few questions if you have some. We could cover a lot of different things there. As you can understand, we went from human issues to agricultural issues, back to human, wrapping up behavior and own personal responsibility, whether you want Fiji water, which is your choice, which makes America great, but give it pause and reflection as we go in there with our energy footprint. So thank you for your time. Anybody have any thoughts or comments? We have about 2 or 3 minutes. Questions on that? Yes. So the question was, do I personally filter the water in my home? And this is actually an excellent question. And it goes to the concept that we can have high-quality water produced at a treatment plant that goes through many aging pipes. And then it comes into your home, And the other thing that's in that is perhaps you don't like the taste of chlorine in your home, so you can remove that right before the sip. We call it source to sip kind of issues in there. I have filtration systems for individuals in my home that need additional higher quality water. And actually in the United States, they will tell you if you're immunosuppressed or immunocompromised populations should be more careful with their water. I drink tap water wherever I go because I feel confident in my immune system and the robustness that I have in there. But young kids or the elderly, we should perhaps treat it with care. So we have that capacity. The challenge is that people say, don't worry about treating all that high quality water, just have everybody get a filter. And the EPA actually looked at this. They put a filter on your tap. Well, who's going to regulate that? And what about the individuals that are stressed economically? As a society, should we provide water for everybody of high quality? And the subpopulation becomes incredibly challenging. With cancer therapies, more people on immune systems are depressed, we really have to reconsider that subpopulation. So to answer your question, filtration has a capacity or some treatment, right? It's called the point of use. Usually we promote it if you have the economic wherewithal to do it. It's a good choice if you change the filter when you're supposed to, because the bacteria can grow and all that. But it's not a solution for our society, in my opinion. So the question again is that's going on right now is Japan. In Japan, they had a nuclear power plant that's just had another earthquake. Yesterday, it stressed it out. And how's that affecting radionucleotides that are going to affect in the United States? I do not promote dilution as a solution to pollution, but there is a lot of volume between us and Japan right now, so that the idea that this particular incident in Japan is going to affect the U.S. is not going to occur with respect to that particular incident in nuclear. But what it is important to realize is that the unintended consequences of generating power sources or anything we do without considering the holistic footprint must be addressed. And a classic example of that is that in the 70s, people in Bangladesh were dying from cholera. And surface water was highly contaminated with cholera. So the World Health Organization and others, and they just dug tube wells. They dug thousands of wells. But they didn't check the groundwater. And the groundwater had naturally occurring arsenic. Flash forward 20, 30 years, people have arsenicosis, and they're now having millions of people that are affected by arsenic. Unintended consequences. Back to what Hopkins, important, do no harm. Evidence-based research requires that understanding of the holistic approach before you start addressing a solution. And the first solution might be the cheapest, but sometimes it's not the best one. Long-winded way of saying radionucleotides are an issue, but that it probably won't be affecting us in the United States. Now in Japan, it could for long periods of time. Other questions? Any other questions? Yes?
That slide up about the swine and the bacterial concentration and the resistance for the lagoons. Is there any information about that for our own human drinking, for our own tap water, just so you can get a comparison as to what type of concentration we're talking about that we're drinking versus that
Right.
swine are putting in the lagoon?
So what the resistant bacteria that the swine were doing can be a concern for groundwater supplies and even surface water supplies, but the surface water supplies are usually treated in many instances. But what we've found is that local wells around these production facilities, actually bacteria can transport through groundwater, and so can viruses, and that we're finding antibiotic-resistant bacteria in groundwater supplies that are surrounding these lagoons. Now, for surface water, we treat it. That's this multi-barrier approach, and so that it's probably not going to be as significant effect. What is important is the antibiotic resistance in those animals also ends up on the foodstuff itself. Every piece of chicken that you get from a grocery store, not every, I can't say as a scientist, I got to be very careful. Almost all the pieces of chicken that you get have Campylobacter on them because of the production facilities in that. What we do know is that a conventional production facility versus one that's defined as not using roxazone or these antibiotics, there's much less resistant Campylobacter on those ones that are more organic and all that. And that's the challenge. What this does mean is you should separate your food stuff and wash your hands and do all the things your mom told you, and we're realizing that it can be a major problem. For drinking water, it's one of concern. Yes? So the question was in Bangladesh, as I used as an example, where you have tube wells, these wells that are dug into the ground that can pull out higher quality water with respect to microorganisms, but then you have to treat that water for arsenic, which is another next step. And that might be a better way to go than actually reverting back to surface water where you have a lot of other potential contaminants. The jury's still out on that. I think that when you start treating groundwater for something else after it's been removed, you have to be aware that you want to protect that water from recontamination. One of the biggest challenges we have is the water becomes recontaminated very quickly by people's hands. Basically, young kids and those things will dip their hands in a stored water. And so you have microbial contamination in addition to that arsenic. So we have to be aware of it, and it costs more money. So all of a sudden, the groundwater that you did a tube well with, which in theory was not going to cost too much money, you now have to do additional treatment. And therein lies the challenge with it. And so it's a pretty complex issue there, and one that definitely needs to be addressed in other areas. One last question. Anybody want a last burning question? Besides that? Okay, no? Yeah, you guys do? Yeah, go for it.
You talked about partnership with engineering, but
Yes.
you didn't say anything about urban and regional planning, and I'm wondering if there's a department here and as the collaboration.
So the question was, is what other, if I can paraphrase it, what other departments are we working with at the Global Water Program, and is it specifically urban and regional planning? Now, across Hopkins, there are multiple schools and institutes, and we are partnering with as many as possible, but we're defining our niche first in there. And so city and regional planning is clearly part of that issue, with, especially in international and in these peri-urban environments, but there's also the question in the United States of dual-use systems. We are in the beginning of those processes. We're not there yet with that, but we're working now core principles of engineering public health and bringing the other schools in that. So the short answer to your question is that we're attempting to address these things in a global way, but we have different focused areas. We're out of time. Apparently you've got a lot of rest of your day filled up with you. Thank you for your time here today, and have a great day. Wash your hands before lunch.